Good morning, good evening. Welcome to Rock Your Supply Chain with real-time visibility. I'm your host, Michael Beeler, VP of Supply Chain and Logistics at Innovex. Thank you for joining us today. So, sometime in the not too distant future, operating a global supply network is going to look like piloting a super tanker with a little joystick. And this digitally enhanced world of edge computing, API powered networks, and data analytics is happening right now due to the convergence of several types of smart technologies. And today we're talking about supply chain visibility, and more importantly, if you can afford not to have it. So the discussion with our guest speakers is around first to last mile visibility from a micro supply chain to a fleet analytics micro perspective. So today we have the fortunate luck of having Christian Cass Mortensen with us. Christian is a senior director of global partnerships and alliances at Project 44. So, Christian, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Oh, yeah. Hi, Michael. Hi, everybody. Really great, and happy to join you here. What to say? Love supply chain, love visibility, love logistics. Joined Project 44 from Europe's biggest trucking company with 9,000 trucks. So feel very much at home and ready to rock and roll. Actually, rock the supply chain.
Awesome. Thank you, Christian. And Ken Evans. Ken is the founder of Connexial, a global freight tech provider of ELD or electronic logging devices to provide fleet management for trucking companies. And as a side note, Connexial has made the FreightWaves top 100 list for 4 years in a row now, from 2018 to 21. So, Ken, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, Michael, it's an honor to be here today, first of all, with such a esteemed panelist and yourself. 30 years in supply chain, I guess you could say it's been my passion and my professional career. But 6 years ago, I decided that the industry deserved better technology, and that has to start really in the cab at the edge. All of these great things that we need in supply chain to know where things are at and know when things are going to deliver can't happen without drivers and without data being processed at the edge. So hopefully we'll get a chance to dive a little more into that today. I'm very excited to be here with you guys.
Yes, and we definitely will, Ken. Thanks for being here. And Michelle Polino, I've had the honor of doing another webcast with Michelle back in July, which was a great success, and it's great to see you again, Michelle. Michelle is a principal analyst at Forrester on infrastructure and operations, particularly in the telecom sector. So, Michelle, can you tell us a little more about your expertise?
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. I have been an analyst at Forrester for about 15 years, and I did join from the telecom sector about 10 years as a management consultant. But my role at Forrester in the analyst community is to focus on various types of technologies, such as Internet of Things, 5G networks, edge technologies that are powering new types of experiences and transforming the way enterprises do business in terms of the operational process that they engage in, the way that they interact with their customers, and how they're generating new types of revenue streams from these new kind of connected environments. And we'll be talking more about the role of some of those technologies in the supply chain today. So it's a pleasure to be here with everybody.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. We've got some great content today, and I look forward to our discussion. So let's jump into it. So Christian, what a year it's been for the supply chain visibility market. Especially, at Project 44, you've raised a little over $200 million in your Series E funding. you acquired Clear Metal, Ocean Insights, and Convey, and recently announced a partnership with Google to provide real-time supply chain visibility, visibility for their digital supply chain twin solutions, which is very cool. So the investments, growth, and developments at your company, it seems like they're coming at a frenetic pace. So what's it been like since you joined the team?
Amazing, fantastic, very cool, very fast. You can say everything is about the customer experience. Today, let's say convenience, speed, and simplicity reign supreme. Customers, they have moved delivery to the core of the new customer experience. The expectations is low cost and immediate and highly transparent delivery of goods. Customer experience has, let's say, fundamentally changed in the last decade and even in the last year. Progressive brands are paying attention. They're changing the way they operate and deliver. In Project 44, our organic growth combined with our acquisitions is driven by a really strong market from large multinational shippers to create a more resilient supply chain by implementing end-to-end real-time visibility that's fully integrated with their transportation management systems, operations, and capabilities. Today, when a consumer, and to take it as an example, that could be a truck driver on his day off, buys anything on an e-commerce platform, they expect immediate visibility to the shipment status, and they get it when they press send and get the purchase confirmation. When a shipper procures billions of euros of materials from suppliers for their factories, should this shipper not receive the same visibility? Or when the shippers, global B2B customers, spend billions of euros with the shipper every year, should they not receive the same visibility as a truck driver or another consumer gets when he or she personally spends 20 euros on Amazon? And for the shipper, having valuable employees diverted from their regular job to chase down a hopeless, outdated, and inaccurate ETA promise from a transport supplier and then forward that to a now angry customer is something they can't afford. To be clear, what an incredible journey P44 has been and continue to be. And the good news is we have plenty of amazing job openings.
Always pitching.
Thank you, Christian. That's very exciting. And not only do you provide visibility, but Project 44 is certainly getting a lot of visibility in the industry. So, Ken, just like Project 44, you are one of the fastest growing freight tech companies in the industry. You acquired Axle Technologies in late 2019. We see companies like yours in hyper growth mode, but we see other companies pivot in different directions. But you seem to have really stayed the course of making powerful yet simple technologies for the market. Did you take a lesson from Steve Jobs?
Well, that might be true. Certainly, we do study lots of people. Steve Jobs is someone who I admire. He had a way really of taking very complex things and making them very simple, and also creating products that people didn't know they needed. So when we look at the trucking industry, what we see is a very fragmented base, as opposed to what Christian was talking about, which is, the large multinationals need all this information and visibility to satisfy their customers. You can't really deliver that mission unless you're gathering all of this real-time, we would call it live information, at the edge of the compute system. So what we set out to do was basically to say, okay, if we want this information, we have to make it easy and affordable for trucking companies to implement it. And I believe there's a big misnomer, at least in corporate America, that, I deal with these 25, medium to large carriers and they handle all my logistics. The reality in the United States and similar in Europe is that more than half the trucks that are on the road are owned by companies that are 100 trucks and less. So these companies are very small. They typically don't have a chief technology officer. They're lucky if they have an IT person or a manager or a director. And so what we saw was an opportunity to create a technology ecosystem for them and put the user actually at the center of the experience. So, we basically build technology that should be intuitive and easier to use than the competition. And as a result, if people will use the technology, then we can supply data to the big multinationals through the pipes that Project 44 enables.
Right, that's a great point, Ken. And a lot of people don't realize that there are, I'll call them mom and pop trucking companies out there, but they're the bread and butter of the trucking industry. And Ken, I follow you on LinkedIn, and I see your posts, and you're not, on a typical post, you're not saying, "Hey, we're the greatest, use us." Uh, you're talking to truck drivers, and you're like, fight the good fight and go out there and do your best. And you're a big advocate for truck drivers, which is so great to see from an executive. Having that kind of connection with the drivers. So
Well,
that's awesome.
It's the reality is 2% of the American workforce drives a truck for a living, and double that number again, and you've got the number of people that are involved in the trucking industry as a whole. And so,
Right.
these people, typically the people actually driving the trucks, they are, blue collar, middle class to lower middle class people who are really trying to live the American dream. And if you own a small company with 10 trucks, you're likely driving yourself, and you've got all of this challenge. How do I compete with the guy that's got 1,000 trucks? So our job is to basically become their guide through that journey. They're the hero. We're just the guide. We tell you how to do it and how to use the technology and make it easy.
That's a great perspective, Ken. Thanks for the input there. So Michelle, going back to kind of the macro supply chain visibility is one of the fastest growing segments in the freight tech industry. What other technologies do you see evolving as quickly?
Yeah, I think one area that we see continued momentum in is the role of Internet of Things solutions to really transform end-to-end elements of the supply chain. And there's not really a standard definition of what we mean by IoT or Internet of Things, but one of the key areas is about connecting various types of objects, items, and assets using sensors or RFID or GPS capabilities to better understand the information that's being connected in from the networks and identify location and status and presence for those connected assets, objects, and items. And then ultimately bringing information and insight to light to bring that to various different users and to identify actions that need to be taken or to automatically take those actions in a true machine to machine type of manner. So when you talk about IoT and the momentum we're seeing there, and then you overlay that with the many different operational processes that are part of the end-to-end supply chain, going from fleet management initiatives to inventory and warehousing operational processes, going into different types of cold chain monitoring capabilities or tracking and tracing. All of these are examples of where you can overlay the value proposition of IoT solutions into those use cases that are part of the supply chain. The other area that I think we're going to be seeing more and more momentum around is tied to the role of digital twins and really using digital twins, which are virtual representations of key processes. So you can represent the end-to-end supply chain and all the inputs into that supply chain, depending on elements of the different suppliers themselves from the tier 1, the tier 2, tier 3 perspective, as well as aspects of what's happening in different geographic regions or with critical elements of that process in terms of issues that may be happening in certain parts of the world with respect to weather or delays that may be impacting supply chain initiatives. And you can do this in a virtual way so that ultimately you then can reroute the truckers if necessary, or use that information to determine what kinds of aspects are going to be impacted as a result of some of the challenges that the supply chain is facing. And I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the reality is the importance of addressing and being proactive using digital twins is becoming more and more important here to manage some of these nuances of the supply chain. And I think the last thing I just wanted to bring up is that more and more we're seeing the focus of sustainability overlay on top of many of these supply chain processes. So you could think about using those digital twins to represent not just your first tier one suppliers, but tier twos and tier threes. You can also think about sustainability in terms of the suppliers that you're partnering with, but also in terms of the resources that are being used by those suppliers. And so more and more so, that kind of concept is being overlaid into some of these areas as well.
That's a great point, Michelle. And you know, it seems like IoT and visibility kind of go hand in hand, because you've got to have those sensors and devices out there retrieving data so you can do some analytics and you can do something with it. And from a digital twin perspective, you know, I have a hard time conceptualizing things sometimes. So if you give me you know, charts and things like that, and I've got to track that, I'm like, I'm probably not going to be much help to you. But you give me a
Michael,
2D, 3D model.
Michael, the whole
Sorry,
concept of digital twin is really the key here. You've got literally millions of sensors out there in the supply chain, right? You have to have a connective tissue that's bringing these things together in a live user experience, right? It doesn't matter what the sensors say if I can't see it and make decisions on it. So to me, it requires, you know, multiple things. You got to have, yes, you have to have the sensors. You have to have the user experience at the edge. You have to have the connective tissue. And then you've got to have a place where these twins can actually be built to make decisions from, connecting all these things together.
Right. That's a great point. So when you have a 2D or a 3D model of something, it's just easier, I think, to conceptualize it and really look at things holistically. So that's a great point, Ken. So Christian, nowadays the importance of having visibility in the supply chain, you know, it appears to be common knowledge. However, there's a lot of competition in this space, and now the visibility platforms not only need to offer a degree of visibility itself, but a better product and service than the competition. So what have you been working on at Project 44 to ensure that your offering is a market differentiator from other companies working in this segment?
Well, I think, Michael, if we all open our browser and look at CNN or Bloomberg or any news or TV and evening news, then supply chain all of a sudden is something everybody is aware of. It was always there, but now everybody is talking about supply chain disruptions. And imagine a single mom on a budget. She goes to the supermarket. She wants to buy a branded baby food because that is the one luxury she can afford, and the shelf is empty. We don't face a logistics problem. Then we face a sales challenge, an attack on the baby food brand value, and that's a potential loss of confidence. And if the loving grandmother go online on Amazon to buy the hard to find snacks that's the favorite of the wolf pack of grandchildren arriving on Saturday and it's sold out, then we have another problem. Grandmother is not the only one facing the wolf pack. Most companies have other giants ready to move in on their market share. In many companies, a shipment, regardless of transportation mode, ocean, air, road, rail, all the way from containers to pallets and parcels, is something we don't really think about. That is until a factory runs out of product packaging and production stops for the next two ships, or a key account is missing three shipments in the same month. Shipments typically go into a black hole until something is missing or someone complains. In Project 44, our ability to bring sunshine into that black hole, to surface the shipments and illuminate a full end-to-end supply chain is what makes global shippers choose Project 44 every single day.
Yeah, and I think
That's a
the
great.
other thing, Michael, I wanted to bring up there, and what Christian was saying, which is, the idea of the supply chain has been around, and processes in the supply chain have been around for hundreds of years, right? I mean, that's happened, and up until probably the past year and a half, it was a something that if it wasn't broken, don't fix it. But over the course of the past year and a half, given some of the weaknesses we've seen resulting from, pandemic issues, the Suez Canal, the ships that are on either side of the US, I mean, you've got backlogs of products, and you have to find out what's going to be available. And every time you turn on the TV now, my parents are asking me about the supply chain. Well, it's because of the holidays coming around the bend, and Christmas, and gifts, and so the reality of this has become a much more strategic discussion that maybe an organization did not have a line item for. I need to reassess what's going on with my supply chain, but they certainly do now. So this is happening because of some of the challenges that we're seeing at a global level.
Yeah,
That's a great
Michelle,
point, Michelle.
I
I
mean,
think a year and a half ago, people didn't know the impact that the global supply chain could have on on your everyday life. I'm sorry, Ken.
yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, just backing Michelle up, I mean, we built all these global supply chains with a lot of length in them, right? A lot of links, a lot of things have to happen right. And so while things are running smooth, that's not a problem. But it's the when, the port shuts down, or when, there's a pandemic concerns going on, or all these different things start happening, you get these bullwhip effects. And because of the length of the chain, the bullwhip gets magnified. So when that happens, the only way to overcome that is information. And that shines a spotlight, hence the topic we're talking about today, which is, guys, if you're going to have global supply chains and you're going to be dealing with disruptions for a long time, you need to have this information. That's the only way you can combat it.
That's a great point, Ken. So on that note, Ken, how are you able to scale at such a rapid pace while still meeting your customer service initiatives?
Yeah, so scaling is always the challenge, but the way we built our company, we focused on obviously design and user experience. So the worst thing for scaling is to take a product that's half baked and then say it's ready to scale. And a lot of companies make that mistake, and then they get too big to change. So what we instead have done, we focused on getting the absolute best ecosystem built that we can. And when I say ecosystem, I'm talking about telemetry devices, I'm talking about the control tower, all those connective API issues, the video telemetry systems, the AI, the digital locks, the security, all this stuff has been built into one ecosystem that's very robust. So the better you build the product, the easier it is to scale. But we also recognize that in the market we serve, it's not just about having a great, easy to use product, because I don't care how good your product is, at some point, some customer is going to have a problem or something you didn't think of. And so just like Apple has the Genius Bar, right? If you've got a problem with your iPhone or your MacBook, we've got a US-based customer service capability that leads the industry. Because, when Joe's out on the road and he's stopped, he doesn't want to be talking to someone in, overseas that doesn't understand him. So, when we set out to build a company, we said, A, you got to solve the technology, you got to do it well. But B, you got to have that service that backs it up. And we view our role as servant leaders. So we want to be in the trucking industry what Chick-fil-A is in the fast food industry.
Right, great point, Ken. And as far as I know, Steve Jobs didn't release any half-baked products. He was meticulous about his technology and the way it looked.
Analyze that quickly and make decisions from it. So I did a poor job filling in for Michelle, but I'll let her add on to that.
No, you did a great job. Michelle, welcome back. Let me, are you back, Michelle?
Can you hear me? Sorry about that.
Yeah, we
just
can hear
cut
you.
me out.
Michelle, let me ask you the same question that I
Okay.
just asked Ken. I want to get your feedback. So in the competitive market
Sure.
of supply chain visibility, what are companies looking for over and above just the raw data?
Yeah, I think one of the big things you want to think about is bringing that data to light in an actionable way. So part of the challenge is we have a lot of data, but the data needs to be useful to the different stakeholders who can get value from it. And so, bringing that to light based on the different roles that can benefit from information about what's happening with the trucking and the fleets, what's happening with the pellets that may be in those trucks and vehicles, that's a big piece of the puzzle. The other thing is around ease of use, and it's very important to think about ease of use because the user experience is a big part of this. You don't want to necessarily interrupt the day-to-day activities that one of the folks that are driving the trucks are using, but you want to be sure the information is available to them. So there has to be a thought process around ease of use of these solutions and how the individual who's using that insight and information is going to get value from it in a way that isn't disruptive to their day-to-day activities.
Right, that's a great point, Michelle. It all comes down to the end user and ease of use. If it's too difficult to use, they're either not going to use it or they won't do a good job at using that technology. So that's a great point. So Christian, one of the goals of Project 44 and its competitors is to attract a significant amount of carriers to come on board and join your network. Why is this so important to you as a company?
Well, Michael, let's try to roll the clock back, let's say, to the late 70s or early 80s. Back then, especially international, but long-distance truck deliveries, they were really conducted in blind. And the driver, from time to time, he would go to a petrol station, take the paper, stick it into a telefax, and send the fax back to the office and kind of like, ping, I'm here. And then a few hours later, he would get a new fax back and somebody will come, who is John? I have a fax for John, and basically telling him where to go next. Since then, we have seen the proliferation of first pagers, the mobile phones, and today most trucks are online via the telematics system or smartphone with an app. However, just because a truck has a telematics system does not mean that the shipper will have any information at all. Even a simple ETA can be hard to get and even harder to trust when the standard response often will be, it will be there in 15 minutes. And if you had a shipper, if you had all the shippers, global and local transport providers, every freight forwarder and container vessel, each trucking company, each subcontractor directly send you detailed shipment information with ETA and milestone data in all the individual and unique formats, then the information would be completely impossible to digest. But today they don't even do that, do they? Think about Visa and MasterCard. Visa and MasterCard provide the global digital infrastructure that enable banks to issue credit cards, companies to acquire merchant transactions, and you personally to safely, with confidence and certainty, Walk into a restaurant globally, knowing that at the end of the dinner your card will be accepted and the transaction approved. Imagine all the banks in the world communicating to each other without Visa and MasterCard's infrastructure. And behind Visa and MasterCard are global, one-to-many, API-driven networks. These networks very much resemble what we in Project 44 had created and continue to extend, and would be impossible to imagine a real-time visibility world functioning without Project 44's Visa and MasterCard approach. And the power behind Visa and MasterCard is that they're accepted in every corner of the world, from the small kiosk to the fanciest restaurant. And that is the success of Project 44, our ability to attract, onboard, and retain carriers of the world in our fast-growing network. And Project 44 has the world's largest network and automatically onboards carriers, allowing for more data at scale and implementation that works quickly and has a low burden on the data providers. And that in turn keeps the network strong. And to me, it's a simple and actually very clear proposition. Each and every single truck is as important a part of creating this global shipper visibility as Visa and MasterCard's payments are to a small restaurant or newspaper store.
Thank you, Christian. I love your Visa and MasterCard analogy to explain it. But your CEO, Jet, said that you're going to be tracking rickshaws. How are you going to onboard rickshaws?
I don't know, but we'll figure it out. I'm somehow sure that
They're going to have a My 20 app on their phone. That's how.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
There is a one or two containers and trucks that also could be tracked until that point.
So, Ken, artificial intelligence, one of my favorite subjects, and AI video to help pilot vehicles. It seems to be the next frontier for fleet visibility. How do you see the introduction of this technology impacting the industry?
Yeah, so video AI is definitely the happening subject right now in the trucking industry. And for us, it's layers of technology. So you start with, what's the base telemetry? You add on top of that, okay, now we've got video and we can gather that data, and how do we analyze it with edge computing? And then you wind up with TMS systems where people can track all of the key events and transactions, right? So we're building that entire stack. But with regards to video's been driven by a couple of things. It's being driven by risk and insurability. So, several years ago, we started getting these nuclear verdicts in the trucking industry. Insurance companies have been steadily raising rates on trucking companies. And a lot of times those insurance rates have nothing to do with how safe the driver is or even how the truck is equipped. So we find that to be a really backwards scenario. So what we're doing is we're enabling video systems. And these video systems, they do multiple things. So there's one camera that's constantly recording the road in front, warning if the truck is following too close, if it's lane departure, those kind of things that you see in your car. But there are also cameras pointed at the driver. And those cameras are infrared and visual. And those cameras can tell things like, is the driver distracted? Is he drowsy? Is he using a cell phone? Is he eating, drinking? Is he wearing a seat? All of those things, we've got a dozen different behaviors that we can detect now with this camera technology. And where it becomes really powerful is when you merge it in with the edge compute telemetry platform. So you actually have two different types of information connecting together, right, through this connective tissue. And the manager can go to one system to look at everything. So you don't have to have separate systems for each one of these different screens. You meld all the data together, and what it allows companies to do is to coach drivers in two ways. One is clearly, you know, at the end of the week or end of the month, the manager can see all the events and review them with the driver and have a coaching session. But we see the real value being the AI that actually happens in the cab with the edge computing. Because as the driver's driving and the camera detects something, it's an immediate audible and visual warning, right? So what happens is the first time the guy starts driving with one of these cameras, he gets really annoyed because it's beeping all the time, literally. And what it's doing is it's calling out these unsafe behaviors, just get accustomed to its habit, right? But what we find is that in response to those signals and those warnings, people actually change their driving behavior so they don't hear the beep, right? And you're actually de-risking the operation, which should lead to lower insurance rates in the future. I don't think you're going to be able to run a trucking or a delivery company 2 years from now unless you have this technology.
So Ken, we talked about this before the show. Is this technology going to be available to private vehicles, or is it just for commercial vehicles?
It's available for all vehicles. So one of the unique things about our company and our edge computing solutions, these are really micro computers, right? And when I say micro, I mean they're less than 10 millimeters tall when you plug them into the diagnostics ports of these vehicles. But we're one of the only platforms that can support everything from a passenger light duty vehicle to an F-250, Ford F-250, all the way to a brand new Class 8 Volvo or Cascadia. So with one device, one low cost, high performance edge compute device, you literally can plug it into anything and we know where it is, we know the operating conditions, we know all the engine diagnostic codes, and we can measure all the performance of the driver in the vehicle. So it's clearly available for vehicles of any type.
Right. That's amazing, Ken.
Mm-hmm.
So, Michelle, going back to more macro visibility, from an industry standpoint, what are the types of companies that will benefit most from supply chain visibility?
Yeah, I think what we found is that many industries are now impacted by the supply chain, whether they're part of the supply chain or they're impacted because the challenges that are facing the supply chain are making their lives very difficult. And so, before you might say, well, those industries that are particularly, in manufacturing and have to move parts or equipment or, aspects of different types of assets from point A to point B. But now, anytime you kind of think about going to a grocery store, or if you're thinking about, getting something for a new type of electronic, that sort of thing, you are now seeing impacts of the supply chain across pretty much many industries, because those industries are using some of those products that maybe they can't get to right now. One of the big areas that we're seeing this kind of impact is happening in the chipset industry, the microchips, because microchips, one, there was challenges with creating them, but now there's challenges getting them to where they need to be so that new cars can be created, new products can be developed, new pieces of different types of equipment that use the IoT capabilities in them. Consumer electronics, appliances, all are impacted now. So it's not just about a particular asset, it's about the impact of not having that asset as a result of the challenges in the supply chain that need to be thought through. And that's having a much more pervasive impact across all industries.
Yeah,
That's a
the
great
chips.
point, Michelle. Somebody was telling me that they were going to rent a car and they couldn't rent a car because of the supply
There's no
chain. And I'm
car,
like,
there's no
well,
rental
yeah,
cars.
I'm
Yeah.
telling you about the correlation. So that's a great point. Sorry, Ken.
So the chipset shortage is real, right? The chip issue is real. And as we've seen this explosion in demand for supply chain visibility, most people are not aware, for example, that the 3G networks are sunsetting. Okay, or if you are available, you heard it somewhere, and why do I really care? I've got a 5G phone anyway, or an LTE phone. but there are upwards of 1 million vehicles on the road in the United States out of the 3.5 million that are still running 3G telemetry devices. What's going to happen in January, February, March of 2022 when the 3G network is no longer available? You're going to see a massive push for people to get new technology. So it's a real issue because there are already shortages. If you go try to buy, for example, a basic iPad, the entry-level iPad, you're going to have a hard time finding it right now because those chips have been allocated to higher-end products like iPhone Pro Max and iPad Pros. So people need to be aware of that. You need to plan on extended lead times, so whereas a couple of months ago, you might say, okay, it takes me 2 weeks to get a camera or 2 weeks for an ELD. Those things can run, months now. It can run 1 to 2 months depending on the quantity you're looking at. Fortunately, our company has positioned so that we have a plentiful stock, and our company has never been built on 3G. We've always been LTE and 5G. So if you can't get it, come to us.
That's good to know, Ken. When people have, when Verizon told me, hey, we're going to upgrade you from 3G to 4G, I'm like, well, big deal. I don't really know what that means until you guys explained to me, what the difference is, especially when you get onto the data side of things. So,
and I think, Michael, the other thing is that 5G, so Ken brought up that 5G concept. So 5G is not pervasively available across the country. Now, you see it on the TV, right? It's announced by many of the providers. But when you think about 5G, one of the things you have to think about is there's the network infrastructure. That's one piece of one part of the stool, right? You've got the other leg of the stool, which is the devices that are 5G enabled. And those devices need to be developed against the radio waves that each of the network providers are using. So, one provider's phone is not going to work on another's. You don't have this concept of roaming at this point. And the other piece of it is you now need to get the devices in the hands of those individuals, those customers, the end users, the truckers, and the sensors that may have these devices as part of that. And so there's a lot going on behind the scenes with 5G. So this concept of sunsetting of 3G and then the possibility of 5G, because you may not have seamless availability. So if there's a critical application that you're using, don't expect it to be available as that trucker goes all the way across the U.S. It's a big deal because I don't think that's as clear. It is to probably us, but not to everybody. So important.
So, Michelle, that's a great. That's a great point. That as 5G technologies come out, first of all, everybody thinks 5G is 5G. It's not. There's multiple flavors, right? But as that increased bandwidth has come out, telecom companies aren't building necessarily a lot more towers across the whole country than they used to have, right? Most of the time, they're taking tower locations that existed and changing the radios out and that kind of stuff. But the point is, you've never had ubiquitous communication coverage in this country, especially like for trucking. There's always dead spots. Go drive through the middle of Wyoming and see how well most telemetry systems work, right? The reality is that you're always going to have that. So that's why the edge computing stuff is so important. What edge computing does is it says, okay, Mr. Truck Driver, your devices are going to work inside your cab regardless of where you are. And then when the network is available, we're going to send back the data. So you're disconnecting that reliability on having to be live all the time, and the technology still does everything it needs to do.
Right. That's a great point, Ken, and thanks for pointing that out, that 5G is not available everywhere, at least today, like some people advertise. So Christian, going back to the macro side, what are some of the problems that global shippers experience that real-time visibility can solve?
Well, Michael, as we started, it's all about the customer experience. And we see that big shippers, they want to stop losing their shipments, stop losing their orders, stop losing their data, stop losing their money, and most importantly, they want to stop losing their customers' trust. And for shippers, Having a single source of truth based on high fidelity data from a large number of data sources, that's a game changer. We see that having detailed, actionable insights into your outbound and inbound shipments have moved from kind of nice to absolutely needed now, today. Can't live without it. Recently, I was talking to a global shipper with 300 plus factories in more than 80 countries. Let us imagine that the upstream for each factory is only 20 suppliers. That's more than 7,000 potential problems. Imagine that each factory get just 5 inbound truck deliveries per day. If you operate 250 days per year, then that's 470,000 upstream deliveries that the shipper is accountable for, that impact the shipper's ability to keep its promise to its customers, that impact the ability of the shipper's customers to keep the constant full shelf promise to the consumers. Becomes the difficulty. Upstream shipments from suppliers to factories could be arranged by, paid for, and controlled by the shipper. Or perhaps the supplier, or even the supplier of the supplier, take care of the shipments. The shipper remain accountable for the functioning supply chain regardless of who arranges the shipment. And understanding these problems and being able to provide detailed supply chain visibility from dock to door is our winning recipe.
That's a great point, Christian. And, I think in the last, 18 months or so, we've learned the importance of scalability. So that's a great point. So Ken, when selecting a fleet visibility partner, without naming names, what are some red flags to look out for?
Well, we just talked about the 3G issue. So a lot of our customers find it advantageous that we decouple communications from the actual device you plug into the truck. So that operates locally, and then you bring whatever LTE or 5G phone or device you want. But to me, the most important thing when you're looking at a telemetry or an ELD provider, first of all, check the references, right? Are they on the FMCSA approved list? Are they well regarded in the industry? And a great way to check that is go to freightwaves.com. They have a rating site which is rated by real world users. And you should actually read what real world users have to say about the technology. And then the third thing, it's a service business. It's not just a technology business. So you need to know, if I have a problem, how is that problem going to be handled? Who am I going to be talking to? What is the response time, the success rate? If you're stopped on the side of the road and been told you're going to have to sit for 10 hours, I'm pretty sure you're not going to be happy if you have to go through 5 levels of support and go overseas to get help. So those are the things that I think you really need to pay attention to. It is a service business and it's a technology business. Both are important.
That's a good point, Ken. Michelle, so it's not a new technology, but do you think that some companies still see supply chain visibility as an early adoption technology, so they're still in wait and see mode?
I think they may well have been in the wait and see mode, but I do believe, because of the challenges that we've seen over the course of the past year and a half, the insight and the value of that is becoming much clearer. So I'd say that the idea of the value of data, the value of actionable insight, not just data for the sake of having data, is really becoming more and more important for many different reasons that we've talked about. The challenge is that you're taking data from many sources, though. So it's not just from one system. You may be overlaying weather data on top of the routes that the trucks are going through. You may have information that comes comes in real time that's changing, well, wait a minute, they're not going to have, there's items I was going to be picking up or that vehicle was going to get. So maybe I need to reroute them, So the role of data and real time insight then is becoming more and more important. And I do believe that the idea of what kinds of investments do I need to make? Can this be valuable in critical aspects of the supply chain in my organization that I need to manage becomes much more evident and much more of a strategic conversation than it was in the past. So now it's not a nice to have, it's become a much more, we need to think about this now. We need to make a plan if we don't already have one, and we need to reassess if we're doing the right things.
Right. I appreciate your perspective, and I looking at the companies who are not taking advantage of visibility versus the companies who are. I think the early adopters are are seeing the benefits of it and the ROI. So, Christian, as the world hopefully begins to recover from the disruption caused by the pandemic, a lot of focus in the industry appears to have shifted towards sustainability. How can supply chain visibility help companies make new strides in this arena?
Well, Michael, I believe that supply chain disruptions have always been a part of society. Now they've just gotten much worse and have received media attention like never before. But these disruptions, they will stay with us for significantly longer. And the world's biggest companies, they're building new capabilities in order to ensure their supply chain resilience. The majority of global companies need to, say, rethink the way they look at sustainability within their global supply chains. While companies that are moving the fleets from petrol and diesel to electric are leading the way, many companies may not have private fleets, or the private fleets make up only a percentage of all the freight that the company is responsible for. I see three high-level challenges that must be solved prior to truly rethinking the supply chain sustainability. The first is accurate and real-time fuel consumption, weight, and emissions data. The second challenge, let's say, is to decrease inefficiencies that cause trucks to idle at pickup and delivery and empty kilometers in between, or empty miles in between. And last but not least, companies need to create the ability for planning systems to contemplate emissions in addition to cost and lead time.
That's a great point, Christian, and I applaud your corporate stewardship at both Connexial and Project 44, because sustainability is such an important topic today, and the fact that you guys address it up front is that's awesome. Ken, what are the? I'm sorry, did you have a comment, Ken?
Well, I was just going to add to Christian's comments about sustainability, and it is a very important topic. But the number one, he hit on two things that are the number one source of waste and unnecessary emissions. The number one issue is empty miles traveled. 20% of all the miles traveled in the United States by a commercial vehicle have nothing in it. And Christian will vouch it's the same in Europe. There is a way to solve this. We have some intellectual property that we're bringing to the market to combine not only location, but information about the driver and his availability that can help solve that. And the number two thing is idling and detention. So a driver is allowed to drive for 11 hours a day if it's a duty day in the United States. But the actual average time spent driving is about 6.5 hours. So you think about the hidden sources of waste, that the truck is delayed at the getting into the shipper or departing from, the loading dock. And so those are the sources of waste that we all have to work together on. It's going to take the entire thing from micro to macro and back to make it work. But those are huge numbers. I mean, if we impact half the empty miles, that's a huge number.
Right. Yeah. Those deadhead miles. The more you can get rid of those, the better. So thank you for the props, Christian. Ken, but on that note,
one comment. Ken, the good news is if the truck only drives 6 or 7 hours per day, there's plenty of hours available to charge the truck.
Yeah, well, that's true. Once you build the charging stations, you might be able to do that.
Yeah, well, they're being built. So, Ken, on
Yeah.
that note, what are the deciding factors for carriers to upgrade their fleet technology to meet the growing demand for visibility?
Well, you've got to pick someone who can make a meaningful contribution to your bottom line. So everything that we have built in this, we call it a transportation platform as a service. You no longer need to pick different suppliers for different technologies. They can all work together in an easy to implement, lower cost fashion. But clearly, cost is an issue. But more important than cost to me is quality of the data and quality of the service. Again, do I collect all the relevant data, and then does my provider get it, connect it together in a meaningful way that I can do things like reduce the idling time, auto bill for detention that my trucks are spending at shippers or receivers, and then does the video system, is it fully integrated with these systems connected together, and does it enable me to eliminate and de-risk the behavior out of my driver pool? If it does, then you will see significant increases in the bottom line profitability and the operating margin for the trucking company.
The great points, Ken. I'm glad you brought those up because there's when people are deciding on which technology they're going to implement for their fleet management, a lot of people they don't know what to look for. So that's a great point. So, Michelle, what are your predictions for the freight tech industry in 2022 next year?
Yeah, I think that, some of the key things is that there's going to be a much more intense focus, in this area across the freight tech industry, as well as the elements that we've been talking about. And companies need to, make sure that they have a plan, they have a budgeted, they have an idea of what their current and future roadmap is here, so that they can really go down the path of addressing some of the challenges and avoiding a repeat of what we're facing in some of these areas today. And I think the other piece, so we've been, you just talked about some of the elements of technology and requirements for a partner in this area. The other thing I just wanted to bring up is don't estimate the importance of the changes that may need to happen, across the people and the organizational side of this. So we're talking about getting real-time information. But that information is only valuable if you can have it become actionable and somebody will do something different because of it. And so that may mean that you change the way I do my job. And I've been doing my job a long time, right? So the reality is there's an organizational change management piece to this that may require a bit of training or a bit of just let us, try it, and then we'll see how it goes. But something that's going to get the momentum around this, because it's not the technology. We've got examples of the technology that we've been talking about. Solutions do work. The challenge can oftentimes be much more on the organizational side and the people side of the chain.
That's the
Right,
number one thing
that's
that
a
we
great point,
see.
Michelle. And it's hard to predict for next year because there's so many changes. Ken, did you have a comment?
Well, I was just going to say Michelle. That's the number one thing we see when customers struggle. Typically, what they're struggling with is change management. It's not the
Yeah.
technology. It's not it's none of those things. It's the guy has used System X for 20 years, and now you're giving him System Z, right? So to me, that gets back to what's important in selecting a technology provider. Well, you got to make it easier for them, and you have to hold their hand through this process. If you don't, then you just wind up with people who have new technology and don't want to use it.
Yeah.
Good point, Ken. Yeah, Ken, Christian had brought up, CNN news. Everybody's talking about supply chain. How can your solutions help alleviate the supply chain bottlenecks that we're reading about every day?
That's a great question. But the number one thing that our technology can do and some of the intellectual property that we're bringing to the market is basically we've created a system that encourages all the trucking companies to share their data and creates a financial incentive for them to do so. So the number one thing that we can do if we want to fix the disruption that we have right now in supply chain is to get more capacity. And the way you get more capacity is you're able to find it and let the free market act on it and pay to clear it. So instead of running around and wasting all this time, let's put the data in a central location where everyone can see it, and then people can actually use free market principles to buy the capacity they need. So that's the number one thing I would say that we can do to help the situation.
Right. That's a great point, Ken. So finally, Christian, can you share anything with us about what Project 44 is doing in the future?
Well,
Your future
I see
plan.
we are kind of we're going into overtime, so I will make it reasonably short. Let's say in Project 44, we are 1% down the road of our journey. So it means we have way far to go. There will be many exciting things to come. And you can say this is really just the start, 1% down the road. And I really can't wait to be a part of that journey. So there will be many, many exciting things happen, both short term and long term.
Thank you, Christian. So thank you so much, Christian, Ken, and Michelle, for participating in the event today. That wraps up our Q&A session. So if we hear of us at Innovex, we're looking forward to seeing our viewers at the next event. I believe that we do have some time for Q&A, so I'm going to go ahead and open up for Q&A if you just want to hold on here. Okay, the first question. Let's see, we have a ton of questions. Okay, first question. Only a certain percentage of companies are ready to embrace and adopt these solutions. What prevents real-time visibility from being mainstream in the market? That probably goes to you, Christian.
Yeah, I think I kind of covered that earlier when I said, visibility is gone from nice to have to absolutely needed right now. So it's a great question, but for those who really needs to build supply chain resilience, visibility is one of those. It's not everything, but it's one of those important things. You can't sort of fix it if you can't surface it and if you can't see it. So I believe that we are sort of maybe of year one of being mainstream, but this is not novelty. This is not something, let's say, quirky for the few or something. This is, we are adopting a significant amount of new companies every single day, week, month, and quarter. So yeah, no, we are, visibility is mainstream. Once you hit that Visa and MasterCard framework, then you're there.
So, Michael, I would just add to that the whole system of benefits and cost has to be assessed here, right? So there has to be a benefit to the people paying for the technology to enable all this technology, and that's something that we feel like we've got a way to do that where people will be eager to adopt technology because it makes the profitability of their carriers go up. So I think that's the key to getting more data, more granular data to solve this visibility challenge. Is you got to show the carriers how they make more money and how it's in their best interest.
So let's take one more question here. judging from the latest trends in real-time visibility solutions and multiple technologies, what types of specialists will be in demand in the near future, given that high-quality products and services will continue to have a pivotal role? Michelle?
That is a
No, I mean, I would go back to when you talk about specialists, right? I mean, I think when we talk about the role of data, do you have the right expertise in-house to make this valuable to your organization and translate the information that you're getting from these many different sources into valuable information for the challenges that you're facing? And a lot of organizations do not have that skill set. And so that gets back to a lot of these solutions need to be very user-friendly as much as possible and simplify the process of bringing to light that information. But also, it may be necessary to get different skill sets in-house around data insight, around bringing to light and translating across the organization the value of the data to say, well, here's some insight you didn't have before. Could it be valuable to you, on the service and support side, or in the customer, experience side of the world, or thinking about it from, the different roles that could get benefits from that insight and the data that you're capturing. So I think there's going to be some new ways of thinking about the data that drives requirements for new skills and or new types of roles in the organization.
Right. Christian, do you have a comment?
Oh, yes. Just for this question, I prepared a list of 250 job descriptions, and you go to our company's website and look under career, and they're all there listed.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks, Christian. We'll send people to your website. So again, thank you, Christian. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Michelle. It's been a great event. It's been my pleasure. This has been fun. So that wraps up our audience questions. We're out of time. So from us here at Innovex, we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. That's great.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. It's been great.
Have a good day, guys.
You too.